With the introduction of Year 9 Season 3 Operation Twin Shells, there came many changes, the most notable of which being the changes to Solus. But these changes to Solus are so misunderstood by the majority of the player base that most people perceive these changes to be a nerf to her overall, but that couldn't be further from the actual truth. To first understand why I think these changes overall actually make her stronger and not weaker, we have to understand her as an operator first. Solus is a 2-speed, 2-armor defender. Her ability, the Spec IO Scanner, allows her to see electronic enemy gadgets from a close distance away. In her loadout, her primary guns consist of the P90 SMG, which is an okay SMG with a lot of ammo and a pretty high fire rate, and also the ITA shotgun. Shotguns are pretty widely considered to not be as good as ARs or SMGs, but if they're on defense, using them for sight setup is especially good if you have a secondary SMG. The ITA shotgun also happens to be one of the better shotguns in the game for actually doing damage. So both of which, the P90 and the ITA shotgun, are actual viable primary weapons, especially because of her secondary weapon you can bring on the side, which is the SMG-11. Her secondary gadgets include proximity alarms and a bulletproof camera. Solus excels at not only denying info, but giving it as well. Now that you understand Solus as an operator, we need to go over all of the changes made with the new season. One nerf that she received was that she can only detect gadgets in the center radius of her screen when her ability is active, whereas before, any gadget that was on your display at all would be detected when your ability was activated. This might seem like a big nerf because you can only see what's in the center of your screen, but you can easily just move your screen around a bit more, and this is not at all an issue. This is one of the biggest nerfs that people point to whenever they say that Solus got nerfed. So if this isn't an actual big issue, okay, well, what about the other changes, you might be asking? Well, another change that they made was that instead of having to wait for your ability to refill 100% to reactivate your ability, now you can reactivate it as low as 50% of the way full. This is a buff, undeniably. Sure, there's more nerfs than buffs that came with this change though, right? Otherwise everybody wouldn't be saying it's a nerf, right? Well, not really. One change that stands out in specific the most is the overclock mode that replaced the scan function on Solus's Spec IO sensor. Most people look at this and think, well, now I can't see what I'm scanning, so this is a huge nerf. Well, let's be realistic for a second. Most of the time, you know what the gadget is that you're scanning. And if you don't, that's honestly just a lack of game sense on your part. If you see two unidentified objects, one is outside standing still and the other one is inside moving around, that's pretty clearly someone on their phone controlling a drone. If you see a still gadget outside of a window, that's pretty clearly a claymore or an air jab, which are distinguishable by their positioning or the sound that they make. If it's making noise and you have a working headset as well, you can just listen to the gadget and you'll know what it is too. So most of the time, you don't even have to scan to see what it is in the first place. So the more game sense you have and the more you're able to calm to your teammates and the better of a headset you have, this nerf to Solus is really not that big of a deal. You might think this overclocking feature is still a nerf, however, which is fair, but that's the thing. Overclocking when you do it actually buffs your gadget if you do it at the right time. How does it do this? Well, whenever you overclock your gadget, it completely refills your gadget meter. So if you just save your overclock to when you are low on your scan in general, you can just refill your gadget meter immediately without a cooldown and keep scanning. Plus, it has the added effect of actually being able to see what is in the center of your screen when you scan. This, paired up with the decreased cooldown time, makes it to where the new Solus can actually be on her gadget for longer than the old Solus, which makes me believe that it's a buff. So far, based off of everything that I've gone over, there's really not a significant nerf that we can point to that doesn't just indirectly buff her in another way as well. Meaning overall, this change isn't really a nerf, and if anything, because you can be on it for longer, it's actually a buff. Because like I just said, every nerf that Solus has received has actually buffed her in some way too. Well, all except for one nerf. The one thing that they did do to Solus that is an irrefutable nerf is the fact that when you overclock your scanner and it overclocks and scans a drone, the drone can actually see that you're scanning it. It's given that warning at the bottom of the drone's screen. But here's the thing. The warning on that drone that shows Solus is looking at you is only activated if you overclock your ability. Like I said earlier in the video though, if you see the gadget is moving clearly in a way that indicates that it looks like a drone and that it probably is a drone, you don't even need to scan it. So this nerf doesn't really nerf her much at all either, because you're never gonna actually be giving them that warning if you're not a dumb Solus player. Even if, on the rare occasion, you do overclock and scan a drone, by the time you've scanned it and called it out, and by the time that they've seen and reacted to the warning on their screen, their drone is already probably dead anyways, or the information doesn't really mean much because so much time has passed. So this nerf really doesn't actually nerf Solus in any impactful way. So of everything that we've gone over, there is nothing that I can point to that screams, this is an impactful nerf to Solus, because every way that they've nerfed Solus hasn't been that impactful, and honestly has made her better in some way that makes up for the slight and unimpactful nerfs. Because of the many things that I've said overall, I can only draw one logical conclusion in my brain. If there's no impactful nerfs, and there's also impactful buffs, and the nerfs that we did get are also indirectly buffing Solus, then wouldn't these series of changes be an overall buff to Solus? Well, in my opinion, yes. But if you're still not convinced, there's one final change that I'd like to highlight that is the absolute nail in the coffin to the argument on why this is the most misunderstood change to an operator. But if you want to know why, first, we need to rewind a little bit. Before Solus ever got reworked to her overclocking state with the introduction of the new season, scanning with her ability button used to just ping everything on screen when you would do it. This might seem good, but you wouldn't normally have to do this because you would have the information of what exactly it was and you could just call it out to your teammates. You also wouldn't want to do this in general because this would completely deplete her gadget. And like I said, people have microphones, so no one ever really used this feature unless you or your teammate needed an exact ping for some odd reason. So with the new addition, instead of having to overclock so your team sees the things that you do, you can now Z-ping gadgets. This is absolutely insane, and it is one of the best changes they've made to Solus ever. And I'll explain why. Z-pinging gadgets with your ability is also completely free, and doesn't take away from your ability bar at all, like it used to. You can even Z-ping unidentified gadgets without overclocking the ability, allowing you to get and give information for absolutely free, because you can Z-ping gadgets that are unidentified. Even if it's unidentified, you can even call it out what it is based off of its movement, sound, or game sense, like I said earlier, so your teammate knows what it is even if you didn't overclock your ability if you have a microphone. So this, the ability to Z-ping gadgets, is just a straight buff to Solus. This is like it's literally just a buff. There is no downsides to this at all. With some content creators already saying that Z-pinging on normal operators and drones is broken, Z-pinging with an informational operator is completely insane, especially in a ranked environment when your teammates don't listen and need to visually see what's ahead because they have an IQ of a potato. So because of the fact that no nerf that Solus received was impactful at all, but the buffs she receives were impactful and her nerfs indirectly buffed her as well, I can only logically say that these series of changes to Solus with the new introduction of the new season actually made her a better operator than before, which means Solus didn't get nerfed. Solus actually got buffed. So if this is true, and Solus did get buffed, why is it the opinion of half the Siege community that this change was overall a nerf? Well, my initial theory was that I may have just been wrong, but after some research, I figured that that was kind of ruled out too. My second theory was that people just had a lack of ability to have some reading comprehension. As much as you may think that this is a joke and I'm being egotistical, my ranked teammates in champion lobbies are some of the dumbest people I know, and their collective IQ is on average about the number of my room temperature. So this isn't actually far off, but I think there's a much better and feasible reason for why this change was perceived as a nerf and not a buff, and that is the reveal trailer. When Ubisoft announced the new season, the new operator, and everything in between, they also announced the new operator reworks to 3 operators, that being Nook, Dokkaebi, and of course Solus. When they talked about the change to Dokkaebi, it was very clearly a nerf. Instead of being able to have 2 calls off rip, you would have to let each call charge for a total of 45 seconds per call, meaning you would only get both calls a minute and a half or halfway into a round. So again, this is clearly a nerf. When they talked about the changes to Nook, it was very clearly a buff. You now have the ability to have her ability completely infinite. Again, clearly a buff. But when it came to Solus, it was a bit unclear at first whether they were trying to nerf or buff the operator. The way they worded the revealed Solus rework in the trailer made it seem like they had intentions of buffing this operator. But when all they did was talk about the nerfs in a way that didn't really allow anybody to see the buffs, and not about how the operator would actually be better off with the changes, of course everyone's gonna think it's a nerf. So when everyone, even myself included, saw this part of the trailer paired up with such an obvious buff to Nook, and with people's already negative perception of Ubisoft and their ability to balance operators out, most people immediately thought the worst, and thought that the Solus change was actually a nerf. And who could blame them? Ubisoft did a terrible job at explaining how the new operator worked, and only talked about the bad parts of it. But if it's clear that they knew the operator was weak, I can only logically say that their intention was to buff her, not nerf her, which is shown at the beginning of the reveal for Solus. They literally said, and this is a rough quote here, that they knew that Solus was underperforming, which leads me to believe that the reveal trailer, as well as the lack of information done about her buffs, was the real reason that most people believed she was nerfed, and not buffed. But after some research, critical thinking, and all of the evidence I've just provided to you as the viewer, it's only right to say that Solus was buffed. and only made stronger after this update. And that is why this update is the most misunderstood update to an operator in Rainbow Six Siege's history as a game. And that is why Solus is not nerfed and actually a better operator and buffed with the new coming season. But with it out of the way, my name's Alka, check out this next video, and I hope we'll see you there. Later.